It's because of these reasons that's exactly why I will never pay down my mortgage early. If I have a 30-year loan, I will be making the bare minimum payments and just investing the difference versus ever putting an extra dime towards paying down that loan sooner than needed. What's up, you guys? It's Graham here. So contrary to popular belief, paying down your mortgage early could end up costing you tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost profit. And to prove this, I will be sharing with you guys some real-world examples to show you the math behind this. If you take the time to utilize this topic and fully understand it, it could very well make you 6 figures richer when it comes for you to decide whether or not you should pay off your mortgage early. Now, most people just conventionally look at the cost of the mortgage over the term of the loan, then they see that final number and feel like they're just getting ripped off. Then they just feel like they want to pay it down as soon as they can. So let's look at a very common example, which is a $400,000 loan paid over 30 years at a 4.2% interest rate. Now, over 30 years on paper, it looks like you're spending $704,000 over the course of the loan. This means you're spending $304,000 in interest on a $400,000 loan. Now, most people see this and they think, that's a scam! Rip off, dislike, unsub. And then from that, they conclude that it's probably better just to pay off the mortgage as soon as possible so they don't have to pay such high interest. For instance, people might see the $704,000 total figure and get overwhelmed by that, and then just conclude, well, if I up my payments by $1,050 per month, instead of paying $1,965, I pay $3,000 per month, it looks like I will only pay $139,000 of interest over the course of the loan if I paid off early. This seems like the better deal instead of spending $304,000 just for paying an extra $1,000 a month. In theory, they should be saving $165,000 by paying it off early. But it's not the full picture. The reason why many people think this way is because they haven't really looked at the full cost of ownership, what they're really paying, what their money is really worth, and instead they get hung up on seeing that final number, which is extremely misleading, and here's why. So in our $400,000 example, your monthly payment is going to be $1,956, meaning that over the course of 30 years, you're going to pay $304,000 of interest. Those numbers are going to be our foundation from which we're going to base all of our examples off of. And when determining whether or not it's worthwhile to pay off your mortgage early, there are 3 factors to consider. The first factor is the mortgage interest tax write-off, and this is what makes real estate investing extremely attractive, and also why it helps to keep a mortgage long term. On a primary residence, you can deduct up to the first $750,000 of your mortgage against your own personal income. Now, when you have an investment property, you can deduct 100% of whatever interest you pay against the rental income of that property. So on a $400,000 loan example, in the first year, you've spent $16,640 in interest. This means that for the average person in a 23% tax bracket, you can deduct $16,640 against your taxable income. This means that you can save $3,827 in taxes. This means that when you have a 4.2% interest rate and you're in a 23% tax bracket, you can lower the interest you pay by the 23%, effectively making that interest rate more like 3.23% after your tax write-offs. Because remember, you're taking the 4.2% interest rate, lowering that by 23%, and that gives you the 3.23% interest. This is your effective interest rate you're actually paying after your tax write-offs. The second factor to consider is inflation. Now, even though you look at the figure and you see $304,000 paid over 30 years, you have to remember, $304,000 15 or 30 years from now is worth a lot less than $304,000 paid today. Because the bank is holding the entire loan over the course of 30 years and all you need to do is pay bits and pieces over time, it's pretty safe to assume that overall, on average, we're probably going to see about a 2% annual inflation rate. This means that even though you're only paying an effective rate of 3.23% interest after your tax write-offs, when you also factor in inflation of 2% on average per year, you're really paying more like 1.23% of interest. Because remember, we started at a 4.2% interest rate. After your tax write-offs were more like a 3.23% interest rate. After inflation, that brings us to 1.23% interest. And the third factor now to consider is the opportunity cost of the extra money that you're putting towards your mortgage. The real question here is, can you make more than a 1.23% return adjusted for inflation, investing your money anywhere else than paying down your loan early? And the answer to this is pretty much always a yes. The stock market has historically averaged about a 7.5% return adjusted for inflation. This means that if you prioritize investing over paying down your mortgage early, mathematically over the term of the loan, you should come out ahead. So with the points I just mentioned, let's take two scenarios here. In the first scenario, we have a 30-year loan for $400,000 at a 4.2% interest rate, which means your payments are $1,956, but you bump that up to $3,000 a month so you can pay it off in half the time in 15 years. Then after 15 years, once the home is paid off, you will continue investing the same amount you were spending on the property, $3,000 per month, but instead investing it in the stock market for another 15 years at a 7.5% return. When the 30-year time span is up, this means that you now have a fully paid off property. You've invested 15 years in the stock market, and that will bring you to an average return of $1 million. So after 30 years, you have $1 million in the stock market and a completely paid off property. But what happens if you don't pay down the mortgage early? What if you just keep the 30-year mortgage and instead of paying $3,000 per month, you just invest the difference? You put that extra $1,050 per month that you would be spending paying down the mortgage, and instead just from the very beginning investing it in the stock market. But here's where things get really interesting. Now, because you didn't pay down the mortgage early, and you instead just invested the extra money that you would have spent in the mortgage in an S&P 500 index fund that's given about a 7.5% return. Over 30 years, you'll have a paid off home, and you'll also have $1,433,000 invested in the stock market. This is $433,000 higher than the person who paid down their mortgage after 15 years and then just invested after that. That's an extra $433,000 over 30 years just by not paying down your mortgage early and investing the difference. Now, if I lost anyone here in these deductions, in very simple terms, this is exactly what I look for anytime I calculate the true cost of ownership for a mortgage. The first one is to subtract the deduction. Now, because you can write off the mortgage interest that you pay, this will save you in taxes. So you basically just deduct whatever income tax bracket you're in against the amount of interest that you end up paying. This often reduces the effective interest rate by 23% almost immediately. Now, it could be even higher than this or it could be lower than this depending on your tax bracket, but for average purposes, I'm just assuming 23% here. The second one is, since the loan is long-term, you have to take into account inflation. Historically, we've averaged about a 2% inflation rate every single year. This means that every year, your money is worth about 2% less than it was the prior year. And this is something that's extremely important to consider that not many people look into. This is also another reason why having a long-term loan is often keeping as long as you can because of inflation, and because that money is going to be worth a lot less in the future. Now, the third thing to consider is investing the difference. Now, unless you have a really high interest rate of like 6% or higher, in almost every situation mathematically, you come out ahead by investing the extra money that you would have been spending paying down the loan early. It's because of these reasons that's exactly why I will never pay down my mortgage early. If I have a 30-year loan, I will be making the bare minimum payments and just investing the difference versus ever putting an extra dime towards paying down that loan sooner than needed. Now, don't get me wrong here, because there are a few advantages of paying down your loan early. Even though mathematically in almost every single situation it's worth it to invest versus paying it down early, there are a few advantages, and this is what they are. The first advantage that I see is that if you have a really high interest rate of maybe above a 6% or so, it's probably best just to pay off the loan sooner than investing the difference. This is because the upsides of investing just get smaller and smaller the higher your interest rate is. At a certain level, the advantages of investing instead just become too small of a difference, and instead I would opt just to pay down the mortgage early effectively just giving you a guaranteed rate of return. Now for me personally, if I had a loan above 6%, I'd probably just rather pay down the loan than invest. But if the loan is under 6% or so, long term, I would rather just invest my money instead. But the biggest advantage here of paying down the loan early is that with our above examples, we assume the person is actually going to invest the difference of the money that they would be paying down in their mortgage. Now, unfortunately, probably in most situations, the person is not going to be disciplined enough to actually invest the difference. Instead, most people will probably just pocket the difference and then recklessly spend it on things they don't really need or not really invest the full amount, and this just totally negates the whole advantage of not paying down your mortgage early and investing the difference. In order for this to actually work, the person needs to be dedicated enough to invest that extra money and not spend it. And I hate to say it, but probably for the average person out there, they're not going to have the discipline to do this, and it's probably a better idea they pay down their mortgage earlier. Even though mathematically they're going to be making less money, it's essentially just a guaranteed rate of return that's a lot safer than trusting them not to spend the difference. And this is far simpler for the majority of people to do. But I would expect that the average person who watches my videos is probably a little bit more financially literate than most, enjoys saving money, enjoys investing it, and therefore, for the people who are disciplined enough mathematically, you should come out ahead by investing long term over paying down the mortgage early. That is, if you can actually follow through with this and invest long term. The next advantage here of paying off the mortgage early is just peace of mind. Now, even though you'll make less money, just having the mental clarity of not having a payment is extremely freeing. This in and of itself could mean you have less stress, you're less worried, and even though you're not optimizing every single dollar, the mental clarity it gives you could be worth it. Now, the next advantage of paying off the loan early is freeing up your cash flow. Now, even though this is a bit of a fallacy in that it actually lowers your cash flow by having your money tied up in a property instead of investing it elsewhere, it will make an immediate difference in the amount of money that goes into your pocket in terms of not having a mortgage payment and instead having all the extra money come directly into your pocket. And again, even though this is a bit of a fallacy because technically this should lower your cash flow instead of deploying your money elsewhere, it does seem like an immediate benefit. And like I said, this is more about mental clarity versus trying to squeeze the value of a dollar from every which way possible. Now, the last advantage I see of having this is the additional security knowing that you own that home free and clear without any sort of payment. No matter what happens to you, if you lose your job, if everything goes to shit, if the market crashes, no matter what happens, you own that property outright. And again, this just goes back to the mental clarity of not having an extra payment and the freedom of knowing that you own that no matter what happens. And for many people, this is worth it entirely just to pay off the loan early. So like I said, in most scenarios, it's more advantageous not to pay down the mortgage early and instead just invest your money long term. The only advantages I really see of paying down the mortgage early is if you have a really high interest rate or you just want the mental relief of not being burdened by a mortgage payment. But for anyone who actually has the discipline to stick with a plan to invest the extra money versus paying down the mortgage early, statistically and mathematically, you will come out ahead by investing long term over paying down your mortgage early. I apologize if I lost anybody with these calculations. I did my best to try to explain it as easily and simply as I can, but if I confused any of you guys, just comment down below. I will be more than happy to try to answer as many questions as I can. So as always, you guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I really hope I didn't confuse too many of you guys, but if you guys enjoyed this topic, make sure to give it a like. It does really help out a lot. And if you've watched it all the way through, if you found this helpful and you haven't already subscribed, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Also hit the notification bell so YouTube can notify you anytime I post a video. Also, feel free to add me on Snapchat and Instagram. I post there pretty much daily, so if you want to be a part of it there, feel free to add me there. And finally, for anybody who's interested in real estate, which I'm sure is most of you guys watching, I have a private Facebook group in the description for anyone who wants to talk about real estate investing, wholesaling, agenting, anything real estate. The link is in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time.